Trials of a Royal Guard. By Ansel. Chapter 14. Into the Fire. From our spot on the knoll, we could see a wall of fire between the front of our brigade and the ranks behind it. It rose to 3 meters high and burned bright red. Our forces on the other side were cut off and the line there was faltering. Divide and conquer. It was simple enough. This was bad. This was really bad. We couldn't afford to lose this many ponies. It would be devastating even if we won. Our momentum would slow and the enemy would have more time to regroup. Major Knight. Move that line forwards, now. Brigadier Hammer bellowed from behind me. Move the line forwards? Through the fire? How could I do that? All those ponies, though, all of those ponies and griffins. My hooves started moving as I galloped down the knoll at full speed. What was I doing? What was I going to do? Clement Knight was hot on my tail as we raced through the ranks. Advance! I ordered as loud as possible while I barreled onward. You are ordered to advance. Do so to save your comrades. They would not abandon you. Ponies around us hesitated but started to show some semblance of order. At a minimum, they were being pulled back from surprise. Officers and NCOs alike started to order the forward motion and flighted soldiers lifted off. The wall of fire loomed closer and closer to me. This is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid. No hesitation, no fear, we are Dread Knight. For Equestria! I shouted before leaping through the flames. Mercifully, the wall of fire was tall but not overly thick. Oh, it was thick enough for my life to flash before my eyes, but I landed heavily on the other side wholly intact. Thank goodness there was armor between my coat and the flames. The scene in front of me was chaos. There were no lines, no order, just an uncoordinated melee. Allied forces and those of the Sudramore were locked up hoof to claw in a violent confrontation. Clement Knight landed beside me and let out a string of colorful profanity before driving his sword through a griffin that was foolish enough to come close to us. Major, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Agreed. Stick close to me. We need to find some pony still in charge. At our backs, other ponies started jumping through the fire. Those with wings flew over it and landed. Officers started to gather those coming through into some kind of cohesive line to join the engagement, but there was little coordination. Clement and I rushed through the swirling melee, showing off the armor and pushing Allied soldiers forward. An enemy griffin or two got in our way, but we made short work of them. Broken wing or not, I still knew how to use a sword and I was still a dragoon. The black dragoons overhead were swarming and knocking enemy skirmishers out of the sky. They'd crossed the fire and were already ensuring their sisters and brothers had cover. A flash of magic sparked ahead of us and was followed by a loud explosion. There were numerous other bursts in a variety of colors before a final one caused the ground to shake. Vice Colonel Glamour was an extremely powerful unicorn and had been leading the Vanguard Battalion. Perhaps where explosions were, she would be, too. I started forwards. Come on, Sergeant Major. When we broke through to where our forces were clearly ending and the Sudramores had begun, we found ourselves on the edge of a crater. Soldiers from both sides immediately around it stood in a stunned silence. Grey Maelstrom was at the very center, glaring at the enemy while levitating both her crystal and a large axe, daring anyone to come closer. Several of the other siege unicorns lay at her hooves, breathing heavily. I'd also guessed correctly. Vice Colonel Glamour was there, too, but she was down. There wasn't any blood, but she wasn't moving. I leapt into the pit and came to Maelstrom's side, keeping my sword ready. What happened? We were cut off and had to push them back, so we did. Risky and costly. They're all burnt out and some have been clipped. Help's on the way. The Sudramore soldiers didn't hesitate any longer. They started sliding down the edge of the crater and coming for us and the downed unicorns. The closest attacker caught the edge of the single-bladed axe that the unicorn deftly flew around. Clement Knight and I locked up with the next few down. Can you please blow them up? I called over my shoulder as I ducked a wild swing. Not if you want me standing. I'm one large spell away from sleepy time, she replied before slinging the axe past me and dispatching another soldier. Great. I jabbed an attacker with my hoof before rolling to the side and stabbing the one in front of Clement with my sword. The old pony grunted, I had him. Yeah, but we don't have all day. I faded to his flank and looked over my shoulder at some of our soldiers lingering on the other side of the pit. They were probably still stunned from the initial ambush and then the display of destructive magic. Snap out of it. Get your commander and these soldiers out of here and behind the line. The rest of you, help us. Move it. A sergeant shoved the pony nearest him and then another. You heard him. These ponies need our help. Come on. He leapt into the crater and slid down to meet the enemy head-on. Many of the others followed suit. Warrant officer, I called, you're relieved. Fall back. All due respect, sir, don't tell me what to do, Grey Maelstrom replied. I'm assuming command here. You realize that taking orders goes with the job. Sit on my horn, sir. Clement laughed at that. At least until one of the random Sidramore soldiers caught him with a glancing blow on the side. Hey! The old pony turned around and bucked the griffin hard in the beak. I shrugged and turned back to the flow of enemy soldiers coming down into the crater. It was slowing and a quick glance left and right revealed our forces to be moving forwards. Every pony, I ordered, follow me up and regroup. I want a line established. Form up, protect your comrades. We fought our way out to find that the other battalions were already nearing our position. The wall of fire had delayed but not stopped our advance. That was lucky. We were lucky. Or just determined to get home. Our forces streamed forwards, crashing into the Sidramore who weren't in much more order than our vanguard. I moved to join them but I noticed Clement panting beside me. I stopped and set a hoof on his shoulder. Are you wounded? What? No. Why? I shook my head. No reason. You can't do this forever. Sergeant Major, those unicorns are beyond valuable and I can't trust any soldier to ensure their safety. Take charge of them. He nodded. Yes, sir. Don't do anything stupid. You've got to get home. I know. I won't. Clement went back and I went forwards. Always forwards. It was time to wrap up this battle. Now that their trick, whatever it was, had been played, they were on open ground. Hopefully they wouldn't have any more walls of fire. That would be nice. Either way, it was time to lead what was left of the vanguard to victory. Brigadier Hammer stood next to me surveying the battlefield. The dead and dying were everywhere. Medics and grave diggers were patrolling and seeing to their duties. I blocked out the moans and cries. It was better for every pony that way. Hammer just shook his head. Not a bad victory, but we lost more than I expected. Can you imagine that it was something as simple as pitch laying under some straw with a bit of that, whatever that stuff is in it? It was a nasty little surprise, sir. Enough to cause us to falter. I guess they hoped we'd try to put it out or just let the others die. He shrugged. Perhaps they don't understand loyalty well. You did well again today. I know you weren't meant to be in this fight. You don't get vacation days in war, I guess. What now? 1st and 2nd Brigade have gone past and begun the setup of some light defenses. We don't want to stay here long given how poor it is strategically, but we're not expecting any counter-attacks. To be frank, I'm sure you noticed that most of these soldiers aren't their best. It is becoming more obvious with each engagement. That was true. They had heart and followed orders decently well, but their skill with a sword was atrocious. I've noticed. Have we killed through all of the regulars? He shook his head. No, his voice lowered. They're all at the other front now. Griffins play for keeps. Minister Sombra believes they've pulled back on us because they suspect we will be easier to negotiate with. And there it was. We'd heard that the Kingdom of Ostveger had finally started to get serious about attacking. They'd delayed after the original agreement, probably to see how well we'd do. Once it was clear we had momentum, they jumped on the back of the wounded Sudramore army. I see, I said darkly. The brigadier shook his head. I know. It doesn't matter. We need to finish this out. Yes, sir, I understand. We turned to the south together and he motioned to the line of mountains in the distance. Now we can see it. That's the goal line, silent. Just like in hoofball. Cross that and the game is over. It was the first time we'd really had that opportunity. How long had this war drawn on now? A year and a half? More? Stratus Knight had been ruined in 6 months. What was going to become of me? Yes, sir. It is going to be motivating. How is Vice Colonel Glamour? She'll be fine. A few days of rest is all she'll need. She used up every ounce of strength she had to drive the enemy back. Unicorns are powerful, but it comes at a heavy price. We can't go on and on like you can. I'm not sure any pony can, I said softly. What? I shook my head. Nothing, sir. If you'll excuse me. He nodded and returned my salute. I trotted back to where my dragoons were rallying. Now for more bad news. Captain Bringia stood at attention when I arrived and saluted. After returning it, I asked, what is the score? I am pleased to say no dead. 9 seriously injured so. Most will return to duty. Many minor injuries, but Zinkiewicz has ZZ top dragoons. Never. All right, everyone, no patrols for us today. Rest and relaxation once you get our tents in order. Dismissed. The dragoons started heading off to the spot we'd chosen. A relatively steep hill that provided a decent vantage point. Clement Knight lagged behind them, moving a bit slow. I trotted over to him and whispered, "Don't lie to me. Are you wounded?" He looked over and shook his head. "No, why do you keep asking me that? You're moving slow." "I'm tired." He was tired? Did he just say he was tired? Clement Knight never said anything like that. Okay. Make one of the younger ponies set up our tents, and if I find out you're wounded and lying to me, grandfather or not, I'll bust you down to soldier 3rd class. Clear. Crystal clear, sir. I'm not lying, though. Not a scratch. All right, well, trot a little faster. You know they worship the ground your hooves touch. Be tired in the tent. Sir, he replied before picking up the pace. I came to a stop and shifted to look south. Those mountains were going to be a nightmare. New soldiers or not, wings or not, they were high ground, heavily fortified, and carried with them the memory of the harmony. Assaulting them would be like marching into a millstone. There would be a cost to crossing that goal line. A heavy, heavy cost. Once again, I found myself in an ill-constructed tent that was meant to be temporary. Another month of advancing against a fading enemy that was now resorting to small, hit-and-run tactics in open terrain. In short, they were failing. They were failing, but we were being extremely slow, cautious, and deliberate. There had been enough surprises. I slumped onto my cot, practically too tired to move. We'd chased down a supply convoy not 2 hours prior. I chased, the rest of the dragoons flew. It was humiliating, but I'd bear it. I'd bear it all for Crystal. A letter was sitting on my pillow. I'd been reading it a lot lately. One more time wouldn't hurt. My knight, I do not delude myself to believe that when you return, you'll be the same stallion as when you left. Just as you should not delude yourself to believe that I am the same mare you once knew. Much has changed for the both of us this past year. So much has changed for those around me, and I presume the same for those around you. None of us are the same, and that is simply the nature of the situation we are all in. What will I say? What will I say, indeed? What to me is as core to my being as flying is to yours. The few times I have been flown is enough to tell me I cannot understand the loss. However, if no longer being carried by you through the skies is the price I must pay for you to come home, then I would gladly remain on the ground with you at my side the rest of my years. I just hope that the war has been sated in what it is taking from you and from me. I grow weary of the sacrifices it demands to its monstrous appetite. My dearest love, you have survived many things before and during this war, so I'll hold on to the hope that you overcome this. You've overcome so much already. Who is to say the doctors were not mistaken? They are taxed from the wounded. They are only ponies and griffins, not infallible ministers of science and health. Simply promise me you will not do more harm than good by trying to prove them wrong. If you cannot fly, then you cannot fly. I mourn the loss for you, but not for me. I did not fall in love with you because you are a Pegasus. As I once told my parents, I would love you even if you were a mule, and they certainly don't have any wings at all. Regardless of whether we fly, walk, run, swim, dance. Always your crystal wishes. I held the paper to my snout. The scent of her was starting to wear off. That was okay, though. There were others and more on the way. There was a rustle at my tent flap and Clement Knight poked his head in. Sir! Could this war not let me just have one peaceful sleep? Yes, Sergeant Major. What new thing requires my attention? Oh, no, nothing like that, sir. Can I mean, if you don't mind. Can I sleep here tonight? That was weird. Sure, Tumble used to sleep in my tent all the time. I rolled out of bed. What are you doing? Clement asked. I'm not going to make my grandpa sleep on the floor. You need the comfort more than I do. That would stick in his craw. I'm sure he'd have something witty to say about it too. To my surprise, the older pony went over to my cot and replied, very much appreciate that. Sure, sure. I pulled my bedroll over and laid it out before collapsing once more on it. Silent night. Yes. Tell me about that unicorn wife of yours. My ears wiggled. You want to hear about my wife? I asked, didn't I? He replied before laying back into the cot. I suppose you did. Well, Crystal Wishes is a unicorn, as you know. She's small and dainty. I mean, for a Pegasus. I guess she's about average for a unicorn. Her mane is brilliantly blonde and has this pink streak in it. Clement snorted. What? You'll find out when you're older. What? He shrugged. I didn't really ask what she looked like. That was a valid point. Ah. Well, then she is witty, sweet, and inspiring. She always knows the right thing to say to me or how to explain something. Crystal goes out of her way for her friends. She also has a bit of fight in her when she needs to. Sounds like a lovely wife. It would have been nice to meet her before. Yeah, although you two probably wouldn't have gotten along. Now you would, but you know how it was. He sighed. Yes, I'm aware. Listen, I can't make up for what I did or what my son did. For what little it is worth, now that it is too late, I would have done it different. Is that so? Yes, it is. I'd rather have had a son than a soldier. In hindsight. Of course, it is too late for that now. At least you turned out all right and I'm pretty confident your foals will be okay. Well, thanks, Grandpa. For what it's worth, I'm glad I got to know you. Dad never had much to say about you and you were always, well, I won't rub salt in the wound. He nodded and rolled over. Get some sleep. Long day tomorrow. You do the same, I replied before settling on the bedroll. Every day was a long day, so why would tomorrow be any different? I didn't have too much time to dwell on it, though. My mind and body gave into the embrace of sleep. When I woke, it was to the sound of a few local birds singing. Despite being on the bedroll, I'd actually slept great. No nightmares, no interruptions, nothing. I got up and stretched lazily. All four hooves then my wings. The busted one made horrible noises, but I was used to that now. Clement was still on my cot. I chuckled and said, "Okay, Sergeant Major, time to get up. I'm sure we're late for something." Clem didn't move, so I slipped over to the cot. "Come on, Grandpa, I won't tell anyone you slept in." I settled my hoof on his shoulder and lightly shook it. "Nothing." Carefully, I eased him onto his back. He looked peaceful. Maybe even happy. "Oh," I lightly stroked his mane and swallowed. "Oh. Okay. I understand." I wiped my eyes and stepped out of the tent. It was going to be a long day after all. Author's note: a little double meaning in the title there, given how Pegasi are honored in this universe after they pass. If you are enjoying this story, please consider taking a look at Crystal and Maya's website quillenblade.com for extra content such as mini stories, an Ask Us form to submit questions, responses to said questions, and special rewards for the awesome folks who support our Patreon. End author's note.